The first reading is from Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 to 7, and you can find it in the church Bible on page 742. The invitation to the thirsty. Come, all of you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk, without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread, or your labor on which does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Hear me, that your soul may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations to know not, and nations that do not know you will hasten to you. Because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has endowed you with splendor. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the evil man his thoughts. Let him turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. The second reading is Mark chapter 2, verses 13 to 17, and you can find it in the church Bible on page 1004. Once again, Jesus went outside beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," said Jesus, and the Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ.
Thanks, Denise. And it might help if you keep open Mark chapter 2 as we look at it together. We're walking through Mark's gospel together as a church family over these few weeks and months. It's been a big week for politics and things like that. Sometimes in public life, in politics, you get those kind of gotcha moments. Does anybody remember that very embarrassing picture of Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich? If you're not familiar with it, this is a man who wanted to be the Prime Minister of our country. They caught him eating a bacon sandwich and he got ketchup absolutely everywhere, and it ruined his political career, arguably. Perhaps not the only thing that did that. There are other gotcha moments, though, as well. If a journalist can snap a politician hanging about with the wrong kind of person or in the wrong company, or partying in a way that they shouldn't party, then that can have a significant impact as well, can't it? Just remember those photos of Boris Johnson partying in the middle of lockdown while everyone else was suffering. Here in Mark chapter 2, it seems like a kind of gotcha moment for Jesus' opposition. The people don't like him. It's kind of interesting. Very early on in this book, from Mark chapter 2, the opposition to Jesus starts heating up. Some people love him, but there are others that absolutely hate him. And as he spends time eating with tax collectors and sinners, partying with undesirables, the Pharisees must have thought, "Gotcha! Take a picture of this, put it on social media. There's Jesus hanging out with sinners." I mean, can you imagine? But what Jesus says in response is actually really surprising, and it's great news for us. Snap away as much as you like. Take a picture of me any day of the week, and you will find that these are the kind of people I hang out with. Because, verse 17, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. It's a beautiful little story. I want to start at the beginning though, so let's read through. Verse 13, once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. Now, if you were with us a few weeks ago, there's a lot of similarities between this and chapter 1, verses 16 through 20, when Jesus calls his other 4 disciples that we've met so far. 2 simple words, follow me, he says. And an amazing response. Jesus just walks up to this person and he drops everything to walk behind him. His immediate charisma and power. But notice 2 things from this episode that I think are really, really telling. First, Jesus Christ really is for anyone. Levi, son of Alphaeus, in a tax collector's booth. It's easy to sort of skip over those words. But tax collectors back in these days were absolutely hated by everybody. It wasn't actually because of their collaboration with the Romans. Sometimes we say that. They're kind of seen as the public enemy or something like that. It's just because, particularly at this stage in the history of Israel, they were notorious for being corrupt and sinful. You had to pay your way in if you wanted to be a tax collector. And then once you were in order to make money, you had to basically charge everybody else for tips and extra things. So you made your living by being corrupt. So you go back and read sort of ancient Jewish documents, and tax collectors were kicked out of synagogues. They weren't allowed to act as a witness in a local court. They'd rejected God, and they'd rejected their community for one reason, because they wanted to get rich. And notice that Levi's stall, where Levi works, is beside the lake in Galilee. It's the exact same place that Simon and Andrew and James and John, the other disciples, worked. So this man is a tax collector, a kind of customs official. His job is to steal from people who are earning an honest living. He's by a lake, and the people he steals from are fishermen, aren't they? I mean, that's the kind of major occupation in that place. Can you imagine those 4 disciples of Jesus thinking, what, this guy? You're really going to call him? And he's going to come and be part of us? Seriously, Jesus? But Jesus calls Levi to be his disciple. Now, we're thinking about a little bit this last time when we talked about that passage of the follow me bit in Mark chapter 1. But I want to stress it again, particularly if you weren't here. I think it's a helpful little point. And it's helpful for all of us to see. In Jewish culture, Jesus was a teacher, a rabbi. He's obviously not just that. He's much more than that. But he at least is a rabbi. And back in those days, it wasn't the thing. You just wouldn't go up to somebody and say, follow me. And they would. That just wasn't how it worked. If you wanted to become a disciple of a rabbi, you had to graft it. You had to work really hard. It was the custom for all young boys to learn by heart the first 5 books of the Old Testament. If you graduated through that, then some would stay and learn the whole of the Old Testament, not just the first 5 books, but all of it. If you were the top of that class, then maybe you get a chance to be considered the disciple of a rabbi. But it wouldn't be you that you wouldn't be asked. You would have to go to that rabbi and say, I really want to learn from you. Please, can I pass all your exams and get there? Rabbis only took the best of the best, but not Jesus. His offer is for all. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow. And when he says whoever, he means whoever. So far, think about it. It's 4 ordinary blokes and their greatest enemy. Soon, he'll add a political radical, an intellectual snob, and a sex worker. And it's the same now. Nothing has changed. All are invited to follow Jesus. All classes, all ethnicities, all languages, backgrounds, genders, sexualities, political affiliations. You may be quite affluent, upwardly mobile. You may be entrenched in poverty. You may be quite young. You may be quite old. You may be married. You may be single. You may be divorced, or twice divorced, or many times divorced. You may be a very religious person. You may be deeply skeptical. But Jesus' call is for anyone. And what are we invited to? Here's the second thing to notice about it. He does not say to him, become a Christian. He says, follow me. I was reading a book this week, and it points out that in the Bible, the word Christian is used 3 times. It starts as a slur for people who follow Jesus, a kind of insult that people used to say, and then eventually, I guess we adopted it, didn't we? And it kind of works. It means like a little Christ or something like that. There's nothing wrong with the concept. But in the Bible, the dominant way that people who follow Jesus are described is as disciples. Christian used 3 times. The word disciple used 269 times. And a disciple simply means a follower of Jesus. Someone who is walking after him, who is spending time with him, becoming like him, and doing the things that he did. Now, to keep on the kind of politics theme, I didn't get a chance to meet our new MP, Hamish Faulkner. Did anybody meet him? Did he come and knock on your door? Anybody in here? No, he didn't. Interesting. But imagine he had. Imagine he'd knocked on your door. Now, the thing that he wants you to do is to put a little cross next to his name on the ballot books. Now, I don't know how you voted, but if you did vote for Labour, to an extent, you've kind of identified with him and his party, haven't you? You might even say, I voted for Labour. I put the box in. The keenest Labour supporters amongst us might be, party members. They might have a poster in their window. But it's a completely other thing, and it would be radical, wouldn't it? If Hamish Faulkner knocked on your door and said, follow me, and you left everything to go after him. You spent every waking minute sitting at his feet, learning and listening from him, spending time with him, becoming like him, doing the things that he does. It would be kind of weird and intense, whatever you think of politics. But that is the claim that Jesus Christ makes on our life. It is not put a little tick in the box marked Christian and leave it at that. The question is, are you actually following Jesus? At the heart of it all is a living relationship with him. It's trusting him for everything. Letting him and the life he lived and the death he died become the center of our lives. It's going to him on the pressing questions of the day and saying, I wonder what he says about stuff. It's turning to him when life is kind of rubbish and suffering comes to seek comfort and help. It's thinking about him when it comes to our money and how we spend it, or our time, or our possessions, or our friendships. It's letting him shape and mold the person that we are becoming. And can I just say, no one is too old for this. Whether you've been a church goer all of your life, or whether you're here because you came off the back of the service last week and you'd like to explore Jesus, here's the reality. Either you are following him, or you're following something or somebody else. None of us are static. We're all on a process or a journey somewhere. Jesus' message is simple. Repent means stop living for anything else, turn around, and follow me. And to put it slightly provocatively, if Jesus is not the very center of your life, the animating presence, the person, the relationship at the heart of it all, if he's not that, then to put the cross in the box marked tick Christian means nothing at all. I don't know whether this feels quite new to you, maybe quite radical. If you'd like to chat a bit more about what this actually means afterwards, I'd love to talk. Maybe it feels like a bit of a wake-up call. But this is the transformation that happens in Levi's life. He leaves his booth, he follows Jesus. And don't you just love his response? Verse 15. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners, in inverted commas, were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. Levi holds a massive party and invites all his mates. It's like a man who is thirsty, showing others where to find drink. He's desperate to introduce his friends to Jesus. And P.S., that is all that evangelism is. One blind person leading another blind person. One hungry beggar showing someone else where to find food. You've got to come and see this guy. He has revolutionized my life, says Levi. And Jesus is right at home in this party. Verse 16, the teachers of the law hated. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he do that? Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now you've got to understand this. Sin is the word in the Bible that describes how each one of us falls short of God's standards. But the Pharisees are using sinners here in a very specific way. They're using it to kind of look down on others. They think you can tell what kind of a person someone is by the company that they keep. Jesus banquets with the bad, they say, and you can't get it. Because they think that being with these people, Jesus somehow endorses their lifestyle. But they don't get his motive. Verse 17 again. On hearing this, Jesus said to them, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Okay, it makes sense, right? You understand the metaphor. It's possible to spend time with people because you want to help them, or influence them, or save them. Jesus hangs out with sinners like a doctor hangs out with their patients. This is not him endorsing their lifestyle. Sometimes people make a point a bit like that. This is the kind of happy-go-lucky Jesus who sort of winks at sin and lets his hair down and relax, it doesn't really matter how you live. Jesus ate with sinners. But no doctor chooses to spend a career in medicine because they just want to hang out with sick people. You don't look at the nurse on the cancer ward and think, oh, cancer must be cool because the nurse is there. They're there because they want to help and change people and make a difference. And it is the same with Jesus. He identifies with sinners because we are desperately sick and because he wants to heal us and help us. The call is repent and believe. And the Pharisees completely misunderstand this. Jesus takes sin more seriously than they do. Instead of looking down on people, he stoops down to lift us up. Now, I was thinking about this, thinking about myself. I think I can often think like a Pharisee, especially perhaps if we've been to church for a long, long time. But maybe just, this is what our culture thinks too. We think Jesus has come for good people. I was hearing the other day about someone in a Christian school who thought that the main purpose of this Christian school was for people to be nice. And it's kind of normal, isn't it? If people in our society think of Jesus at all, we think about his moral teaching. We think he's kind of a nice person and he calls us to be nice. But if that is what we think, there's a huge challenge here. Like I know I just said that Jesus' call is for anyone. Actually, there's someone here that it's not for. Look at it. Verse 17. I have not come to call the righteous. There's a category of people that Jesus is not interested in. It's not describing here people who somehow are good or fine. It's people who think that they don't need him. To approach Jesus thinking that we don't need anything from him, but instead we've got something to offer, something that qualifies us for his kingdom, is to get it completely wrong. Apparently, according to the Journal of Preventative Medicine, men are less likely to go to the doctor when they need to than women. We laugh at that. And yet, how many of us do the same with our sin? And sometimes that's particularly true for people who are used to spending a lot of time in church or who have a kind of respectable background. As Christians, it's easy, isn't it, to become a bit like the Pharisees, to look sideways and make an excuse, at least I'm not as bad as them. But all of humanity is infected with the same disease. There's a challenge in it, but there's also a huge encouragement, isn't there? For those of us who know we fall short of God's standards, Jesus is the great physician. Have you ever met someone, or maybe you've felt this before, who says, I'm just not good enough for church. It's not for me or for people like me. I've met people like that. But to feel our sin, to know our sickness, is in fact the first symptom of spiritual health. Jesus is the doctor we require, and he's become precisely for people who know they need him. He comes into the world not just as a teacher, but as a healer. He sees the sickness of sin and pities us. He comes to give health and cure to the dying, to heal the brokenhearted, to offer strength to the weak. And as one person puts it, no sin-sick soul is too far gone for him. It's his glory to heal and restore the most desperate cases. For unfailing skill, for unwearied tenderness, the great physician of souls stands alone. There's none like him. Finding himself at a banquet with sinners is not a mistake. This is not a gotcha moment. This is Jesus' very purpose. I love that reading we had from Isaiah 55. God inviting those who have no money to come and eat. Those who are thirsty to come and drink. A huge party for sinners who don't deserve it. That's exactly what we're going to be celebrating in just a moment. The bread and the wine that speak of his love for us and his death on our behalf on the cross. He is the God of our salvation, and he shares his bread with sinners. As we close, I just want us to imagine, just take a few moments, to imagine what it would look like to be part of a church that looks like verse 15 of Mark chapter 2. Not a museum for saints, but a hospital for sinners and sufferers. A community that's not a place where you need to put on a front, your sort of Sunday best, the mask that says, I'm doing okay. A place where people who feel like they're not good enough can come in and meet a bunch of people who say, neither are we, who admit it. It shouldn't be hard. I mean, just think what we did a few moments ago as Pauline led us. Every single one of us, out loud, in front of one another, admitted that we're totally rotten at our core and that we desperately need God's help and forgiveness. Imagine the difference it would make to our community, our fellowship, if verse 15 described us. Imagine the difference it would make to our mission and our outreach to those around us. Sounds beautifully attractive, doesn't it? How do you get there? It comes from seeing our own need for Jesus. One final quote as we close. It's quite futile saying to people, go to the cross. We have to say to people, come to the cross. And there are only two voices that issue that invitation. One is the voice of Jesus. The other is the voice of the forgiven sinner who knows themselves forgiven. And that is our part. So isn't it amazing? Jesus came not to call the righteous, not for people who think they're fine, but to bring sinners back to himself. Let me pray as we close. Our Father, thank you for Jesus' compassion, the great physician of our souls who heals the brokenhearted and restores us to right relationship with God. Thank you that we're invited to that banquet. And Father, I just pray that as a church community, increasingly you'd help us to see our need for Jesus and to share him with those around us. And we ask this in his name.